Wow, how's everybody doing? Good, all right. Say hi. Hi. Awesome. I don't know why, it just makes me feel a little less nervous. This just really means a lot to me as a drag artist to be in a church. Doing spiritual stuff is really rad, especially doing it in Idaho. I've done a lot of these services in San Francisco and Chicago and larger cities, and it's so nice to be home in Idaho doing this. And so, what is a sanctuary? Sanctuary is a holy, sacred place. Sanctuary is the most sacred part of a place of worship. Sanctuary is a building or room for religious worship. Sanctuary is a place that provides shelter or protection. Sanctuary is refuge, shelter, retreat, haven, residence, asylum, sanctum, harbor, oasis, a fortress. The sanctuary was a house for runaway teens. The refugees found sanctuary when they crossed the border. What is sacred? Sacred is simply worthy of awe and respect. I know God can be a big word even in church, so what is sacred? Worthy of awe and respect. I was thinking about what is a sanctuary and when did I first experience sanctuary? And I don't remember a lot of my childhood for reasons, we'll just say that. But one of the first times that I can remember this sort of, I think, feeling of sanctuary, especially from a kid's eyes, because I think, sanctuary to me is it's just a place where you don't have, you can just be, I remember my dad, I grew up in Wendell, Idaho, and my dad, I was probably I think 9 or 10, and my dad he would load me up in the wheelbarrow along with my brother and my cousin Mandy and my cousin James and my cousin Brandon and what other neighborhood kids were around. And he would put us all in this wheelbarrow and then just run through the yard with us in this wheelbarrow, which I'm sure nowadays people would be freaking out. If you saw it in a TikTok, I'm sure there'd be some reports being made somewhere. But in all actuality, I felt the safest, one of the safest times I'd felt in my entire life. It's really interesting that my father was a part of that. Sanctuary was in that wheelbarrow that my father pushed me and Mike in. Sanctuary was in that church I grew up in. Sanctuary was in my head where I've spent the bulk of my life. Sanctuary was at the kitchen table where my mom asked, "What song would you like to hear at your funeral?" Sanctuary was in the arms of my ex-husband. Sanctuary was in that friendship that led to assault. Sanctuary was in that stranger's room. Sanctuary was in the MDMA, the E, the K, and the T. Sanctuary was on the dance floor of the balcony, the Emerald Club, and even the Lucky Dog. Sanctuary was at Allies Linked for the prevention of HIV and AIDS. Sanctuary was in my arms when my nephew took his last breath. Sanctuary was at Man's Country, Steamworks, and Blow Buddies. Sanctuary was where my name couldn't stay out of your mouth. So one of the things that I've come to understand about this reflection of sanctuary too is that many of my sanctuaries are no longer sanctuaries. I think there's sometimes harm happens in these sanctuaries. I think sometimes, we end up getting hurt by the people in the spaces. I think oftentimes we outgrow them or we become different. I think there's the perception that, I think sometimes, and I think this is kind of my I guess my call to being in this space with you all today is this idea of what is sanctuary and what is my role in sanctuary. I think from like a child's eyes and from like a less wise, maybe a child, maybe someone before I was age 40, we'll just say that, that like a lot of times I was seeking sanctuary in sameness. I found sanctuary with the queers in the clubs. I found sanctuary when I hearted Jesus with others who hearted Jesus. I found sanctuary in so many places. And once I began to see difference, or I thought I was different, I began to feel like I wasn't safe anymore, or that wasn't the sanctuary for me. And I feel like that's really the challenge that I want to kind of, like as an adult or as somebody who's older, I don't know. I don't like call myself an adult, but I have come to see the value in difference and see safety even and growth and all that sort of thing. And so one of the things that I know about like having a drag sanctuary, there were people who were like, can I go to that? You know, like I'm not a drag queen, or I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community, or I don't even know what to do with God, you know? And I was like, and that's perfect, you know? A lot of what's made it okay for me to be back in like sanctuaries like this is not that it was full of people like me, but that I could be me around people who were not like me, and be loved and celebrated, and not like that difference is actually like what brings us closer together. It's what I have to bring to the table, versus the thing that makes me the same as you. And that's, I think, one of the things it is important for us to find sanctuary in sameness. Sometimes that's the only place we can find it. But I think oftentimes we find ourselves in situations where we, you know, like how do we, I think especially as spiritual people who are trying to, you know, have a spiritual way of life and maybe like, I don't know, do something worthwhile with this time that we have on earth that's not just about us. Is, you know, like what is this role that we play in sanctuary? And so I would really, whenever invited, I think it's really important for us, when invited, there are times when you don't get to go there, but there are times like this when it's really important actually for people who don't look like me, talk like me, pray the same God as me, whatever, you know, like the fact that you're here actually is part of my healing process, especially as somebody who's dealt with, you know, spiritual trauma. I had to leave church because of my queerness, because of my HIV status, because of my addictions, because of my transness, and it's been really important for me to find myself in familiar places, in those places that I once wasn't able to show all of who I am to be in, you know. And I've been fortunate enough to not live in Idaho for about a decade or so, and that was not meant to be shady at all. I realize how that sounded, and that's not what I meant. But I feel really grateful that I had the opportunity to go somewhere else and to have a new experience and to really become to value difference, because it really took me going into different spaces in order for me to find more of who I am. Sanctuary is where all is sacred. Sanctuary is where I escape to. Sanctuary is where creation begins and ends. Sanctuary is where I am called by my name. Sanctuary is where intimacy spreads its wings. Sanctuary is where freedom and liberation need not exist. Sanctuary is where I go to hide so I can be seen, heard, and valued. Sanctuary is where I can bring all of who I am, even if I'm afraid. Sanctuary is where my uniqueness, I'm going to say this again. Sanctuary is where my uniqueness could never be terminal. Sanctuary is where I am not told I am brave, nor is it expected for me to be. Sanctuary is where my difference connects me to you, no longer at our sameness. Sanctuary is when I stopped chasing the glitter and spent a little time in the dark. Sanctuary is where I'm reminded that separation is a delusion and a lie. Drag is sacred, worthy of awe and respect. My drag sanctuary is often covered in rhinestones, Swarovski to resin. My drag sanctuary puts a twinkle in my eye and brings one to yours. My drag sanctuary lifts your spirit and mine. My drag sanctuary is a gift, a co-creation with the divine. My sanctuary softens the blow of life. My drag sanctuary is my gift to the world. My drag sanctuary is a safe place to be seen in. My drag sanctuary is where I care for my community. My drag sanctuary is where hope resides. Grace is received and given. My drag sanctuary is where I often escape to. My drag sanctuary liberates me and all who let it. My drag sanctuary is not that serious and at the same time life-saving. My drag sanctuary is at the parade, the rally, and yes, even church. Sanctuary is created when people different from myself allow me to be seen. She's repeating herself, but they say that's important when you talk. So sanctuary is when I allow those different from myself to be a part of my healing. Sanctuary is where I always find myself and yet struggle to find sanctuary. Sanctuary is my body. It finally is my body, where I reside with estradiol, Biktarvy, and Wellbutrin. Those are medications. In the sanctuary, we offer ourselves at the altar. In the sanctuary, we dance like David, Electra, Angel, Candy, and Pray Tell danced. In the sanctuary, we soften the blow of life and increase it by infinity. In the sanctuary, we receive wisdom in our body. In this sanctuary, we widen the intelligence that dwells in our heart. In this sanctuary, we build strength of mind. In the sanctuary, I cry, I scream, I wail in pain, grief, anger, and even joy. In the sanctuary, I break open to more, never apart or fragmented. In the sanctuary is where I learned I wasn't broken, but broken open. In the sanctuary, I am a part of something sacred among the sacred. In the sanctuary, I am we, and you are us, and we are them. Sounds like something from the 70s. So I leave this, I'm just kind of, again, putting it out there. It's been really thoughtful and helpful for me to think about sanctuary and where I have found sanctuary, who I have met in sanctuary, and what sanctuaries maybe I would like to continue to find myself in, maybe these sanctuaries that I've never been before. And so where do you find sanctuary? Where do you create a sanctuary? Yeah, and then I'm just going to say 3 more things and I'm done. But got to, bring it down a little bit. So in the sanctuary, we receive wisdom in our body. In the sanctuary, we widen the intelligence that dwells in our heart. In the sanctuary, we build strength of mind. The end. Thanks.
Amen.